Welcome to the show, Kyle Depiesse. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. You nailed the last name. You got it. And I got to tell you, I'm excited to be here. So thanks for having me on.
Well, I really appreciate your time and super grateful for you and everything that you stand for and your message and your journey and how you share it with the world. And we'll get into a lot of the things that you're doing and actually some of the things that I get to participate in.
Yeah.
But I noticed you shaved your beard, my friend.
Yeah. It's, so there's a couple things, right? So first, I live in the Northwoods of Minnesota.
And you have like a big, bushy, Jesus-style beard. So let's not, like, people who are listening are like, oh my God, they're talking about shaving. Like, no, Kyle has a prominent beard.
Thanks. And I'm proud of it.
Yeah, you should be.
There, man. And so in the Northwoods of Minnesota, it gets cold in the winter. So my agreement with my wife, because she does not love my beard. So my agreement with her from first snowfall until when the ice melts on the lake, like fall, winter, I get to let the beard go. No, I've got to trim it. I've got to shape it. It can't just be this out of control thing. And so, we're in the summer right now, end of summer when we're recording this. And so I cut it, but I trimmed it even further. So when we're recording this today, my son is 4, just a little bit over 4 years old. And today was his first day of school. And so Dad, myself, I am his teacher. And now he's pre-K, right? So like I'm using school pretty loosely here in quotes. If I can get 15, 20 minutes of writing some things, like if I can get his attention, I'm thrilled. So I thought to myself this morning, I'm like, well, I want him to know like this is a fun thing. This is cool. This is good. And we should take it seriously. And so how do kids learn? Well, kids learn by watching what other people do. Mm-hmm. More is caught than taught. So I'm like, I'm going to take this serious. So I said, Cal, my son's name is Cal. I was like, I'm dressing up. I'm putting a polo on and I'm shaving and I'm trimming and I'm going to look good doing my hair. Like normally I wear a hat and I wear a t-shirt. Like that's kind of my style. That's my brand. Because I want him to know like this is a serious thing and mm-hmm. Dad takes it serious. And if we can create a transition from playtime to school by just changing your clothes, similar to as professionals working from home, and then we can transition out of it, put the play clothes back on. It becomes this thing. And, I think you'll hear the story as a stay-at-home dad for a while. It's just really important for me to be a big impact and influence in my son's life. So that today made its way through in this world by just shaving my beard and trimming it up and
I love it.
Cleaned up.
Dress the part.
Yes.
Dress the part, right. Sir. Professor. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
It was really funny, not to get off track, but I was listening to, I think it was Mike Ayala's podcast talking about, and who actually Mike introduced both of us, right? But he was talking to somebody about a 4 or 5 hour school week. Have you heard of this?
No.
Where kids, there's an entire movement of people, and I'm not promoting anything good, bad, or ugly, but just something super fascinating that, sort of like the Tim Ferriss strategy of work of the 4-hour work week. They have this methodology of how can we cram the educational process into 5 hours a week so that kids can spend more time playing, spending time with their family, traveling, experiencing things. And I just thought that was really fascinating. And I know you do a lot of that stuff with Cal and take him out, have guys trips and stuff like that, which is really fun.
Yeah. Well, I used to be a public school teacher, high school teacher for 2 years. So you get a peek behind the scenes. And we're fortunate we've got one kid. And so I can teach him a lot in a short period of time, man. There's just not a lot of fluff that we have to go
That's
through.
Right. That's exactly what these guys are talking about.
You can get a lot done in a short period of time. And that's our goal because we want to get outside and we want to experience the great outdoors and all the lessons that just can come from that. So yeah, that's what we're working towards.
Well, we're definitely going to get into education and financial literacy. And I know that's a subject matter that is near and dear to you and you speak that truth. And I suppose, some of the things that, let's kind of start there is, your background of being in corporate America for 15 or so years and really asking the question, like, is this the way I want to live my life? Is this fulfilling to me? At that time, you speak pretty publicly about, your financial situation and the amount of debt you had, and how how you got there is less relevant than how you got yourself out of it, which I think is, a lot of your messaging. And the way we're educated about money and money mindset and our attachment to money. And so I guess start with sort of why is it that our system educates us the way it educates us? And where do you see the biggest flaw? And then what's the number one piece of advice you find yourself giving?
Oh man, is that a good question? We could jam on this one for a while. So you have to think about what's the goal of the school system, and where are the incentives behind that, right? So I was a business teacher. Fortunately, I was in a school district that required personal finance to graduate. It was not elective; it was required. And then they also required a semester of economics, and I think that is beautiful. That's brilliant. I like that. I'm an advocate for that, because I think that we should be teaching our kids how to critically think, and then teaching them skills that they can go out into the marketplace and use for good. Right. We live in a capitalism, in a capitalistic structure. So we need to teach them skills that are meaningful and will help them thrive past school. I think, unfortunately, too much of the time we're focused on teaching to successful ACT and SAT scores. And a lot of times, some of the things that we teach under those banners aren't really relevant in the real world anymore. Made a lot of sense in the industrial era. It made a lot of sense then, but we have not evolved like we should. So I came in and I taught entrepreneurship. It was taught before I was there. So I strongly encourage that class to start a coffee shop, start something where they could be generating money, where they have cost, where they have profit, and they figure out what to do with it. Like, we can talk about theory behind that stuff, and we could study theory, or I can put them into an environment where they are forced to learn it real life, real time, and make those decisions that will actually have an impact on something. So that's what I believe in. I believe in teaching something that is relevant and will help you successfully navigate the next chapter and next chapters in life. I don't think that always is the way that our school system is currently working. But that's kind of where we're at. And that's why we're seeing a lot more people kind of move into different ways of learning right now. I mean, I'm converting, this is a little bit off topic, but you'll like this, I think. I'm converting the shed that we have down by the lake. I'm converting it into a sauna. Well, I'm just YouTubing it. That's what I'm learning that as a skill. And you would be shocked, like, you won't because you know this, but you can learn so much. Yeah. By at your fingertips, how much information and knowledge is out there. And that's going to disrupt, I think, education going forward. But that's just a simple example. Is I'm a shed to a sauna. I'm 41 years old. I'm figuring this out on my own. Kids can do the same thing. And so my goal had always been, how do I teach kids to critically think? How do I give them skills so that they can be successful in the marketplace? And then knowing that we best learn by doing. So how do I give them that environment? So that was kind of my approach to teaching.
So good. There was a book I was reading a couple days ago about delayed gratification. And they had this study, and I'm sure you've heard about this, is that they've had this study where they give kids like marshmallows. And I actually did it with my kids this weekend after reading this thing, okay? And I gave them one marshmallow, and I said, and my kids are 2 and 4, so kind of like Cal, where they're just old enough to understand, but like understanding of marshmallows and what it takes to get a marshmallow, like they're totally in tune. So I said, you get one marshmallow right now, and I put it on a plate in front of them. And I said that if you wait for 5 minutes, you can get 3 marshmallows. And they comprehended it. I asked them to repeat what I said. They comprehended it, and like they actually waited 5 minutes, and they got 3 marshmallows. Now, I tell that story because what the study shows is that there's about a third of the kids that actually wait, and the study shows that you have to wait for 20 minutes. But I was just practicing.
Long time.
It's a long time for a kid to wait, and so what they realize is that they followed these kids 20, 30 years after these studies, and they saw that they lived healthier lives. They took care of themselves. They had better relationships. They did more successfully in their careers and their jobs because of this idea of delayed gratification. And kind of tying it back to money, and kind of what you see is, what is it that causes people to get into bad financial situations? Is it our lack of education and the way we're educated as kids and the way we talk about money as kids, or through adolescence, if you will? Or is it our relationship with money that we just have a consumer type of environment? We're fed products to consume all the time. It has nothing to do with education. It has to do with our environment that we're in. Where do you see the trend of the majority of people, right? And I think that a lot of people fall in that category. I won't say that, the awareness of money mindset is a proclivity of the general population. I think people are starting to talk about it, right? There's sort of pioneers in the space, but this is still a relatively new topic, 5 or 10 years. So what do you see?
So to your point and to what we just talked about, I don't know how is no longer an excuse. I mean, we can say it's an excuse, but it's no longer a valid excuse, because you can simply, Google how many resources are available, like books, podcasts, YouTube, Google, so we can no longer say that. Money mindset, what was our money blueprint, the environment that we were grown up in, that plays a role in it. Yeah. But I think to what you just said in the marshmallow theory, I've seen the video, and it's really cute. You should send a link in your show notes if people haven't seen it. It's really good. But the whole point there, and I believe that as well, most people don't know how to play the long game. And it's the same thing here. It's making short-term sacrifices. It's making long-term sacrifices for a short-term win. And most people absolutely cannot understand that concept. All you have to do to be successful, especially for this conversation as it relates to money, can you make short-term sacrifices that will gain you in the long term? And most people cannot do that. Mm-hmm. So I taught high school personal finance. And it's just funny to watch the kids that you teach, and you're like, I think they got it. And then you see a little bit later, you're like, darn it, they did not get it, And you see them graduate high school, they're in college, taking on debt, and then they post how they just bought a brand new car on Facebook and look at my big boy or big girl purchase. And I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my gosh, I drove a 20-year-old just beat up car as long as I possibly could, because I knew that if I could just kind of hang on to this thing, I don't need to go out and buy a $25,000 Jeep right now when I'm in college and I've got all these student loan debts. You don't need to do that. So I think most people struggle, and they live in the present, they live in the now, and that hurts them down the road. And that's a theme that we could talk about in finance, in entrepreneurship, in relationships, in health. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing across the board.
Yeah, and I'm not even going to pretend to know what's going on, because I think the world is so different than it was. I remember a phone used to be $50. And we would consider oh my God, that guy has a $99 phone. I'm going to buy a $50 phone. Yeah. Nowadays, people walk around with a $1,000 phone like it's nothing.
Yeah. That's pretty wild.
Right. And we're not talking about a 3% increase of inflation here. So just really bizarre, this the spending behavior and the mindset behavior without earning capacity.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
You talk about these 4 lessons that through your journey, you really talk about a lot. And you say that, understanding our relationship with money, controlling our circumstances. I can only control my outcome. I cannot control my circumstances.
Yeah.
Having a money mindset and understanding money is a team effort. Mm. And I love this one. Rethink everything when it comes to understanding your relationship with money. Mm. And then the 4th one is reset your sights on a big, audacious goal. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, wow. So I think to paint the story, this would be in between 2015 Christmas and then New Year's of that year. I always do this nerdy thing where I kind of sit down and I recap the year in PowerPoint, and I look at every category of life that I define as important, right? Spirituality, finances, health, relationships, hobbies. And I just do an honest assessment. Like, how did I do? How did I do versus how I thought I was going to do? And then I project the next year. Like, what are my goals? And I sit down with my wife and we go through this together. Well, finances, that's easy because there's metrics, right? And the metrics don't really lie. The numbers don't lie to you. So I got down this rabbit hole that one year, and I looked at Social Security website, and I just was interested to see what my projected Social Security earnings would be. SSA.gov, everybody, you can go do that yourself. And we can argue about how long Social Security will be around, if it's a thing, does it matter? Will it, put that aside for a second. But what it does is it projects your Social Security at retirement, but it uses your life to date earnings. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if you have ever done this, but I did. And I had made, at that time when I looked in my mid 30s, I had made well over $1 million in my life. And it was such a cognitive dissonance for me, because I looked around and I'm like, well, where did it all go? Like, I don't have it. And then I yelled to my wife, Lois, who's in another room. I said, Lois, what's your Social Security number? I want to do the same thing for you. And I did that for her, plugged in her numbers, spits out her life to date earnings, same thing for her. So combined, well over 2 million. And I'm looking around and I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I'm confused. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. Like, it's this cocktail of emotions that I wasn't ready for. Mm-hmm. But it's in that moment where you're like, all right, I got myself into this. I get myself out of this. And so that's where I kind of come up with those things that you had just mentioned. So let me speak specifically to, I did this with my wife. Like, we're in a journey together. Finances is one part of that journey. And we just sat down and we said, okay, what we've been doing hasn't worked. It's gotten us here. Let's do something different. And so we just started to implement Dave Ramsey's plan mostly. And we just paid off a ton of money in a relatively short period of time. And people will look at it from the outside and they'll be like, wow, $380,000 in 38 months. Now, 38 months sounds like a long time when you're in it. But again, being 41 years old, that was a really short period of my life where we sat down and we said, we're doing things a little bit differently here. And this is going to be what springboards us forward into living this life that we really, really want. And that's where that big audacious goal comes in. As we sat down and we said, what do we want life to look like? Where do we want to live? What do we want to be doing? Where do we want to travel to? Who do we want to hang out? All of those things. And you've got to have this compelling vision that pulls you into this future that you want. Otherwise, what's it all for? And so that's kind of where those elements came from.
Well, one of the things that really resonates with me is, and you embody this, is rethink everything. I mean, you're a guy who was in corporate America, successful, made good money. Yeah, you accumulated a debt for yourself, but, men, ego, I'm the breadwinner, right? If I have to work, and then in your story, it's like, well, wait a second. What do I really want? I just want to stay home with my son. I want to be a dad.
Yeah.
And having the courage to look that in the mirror and face the truth of that, and that you're not less of a man if I stay home and father my kids and let my wife's job and career thrive. Tell me about that process.
Man, it's tough. It's tough for both my wife and I. Want to acknowledge that and acknowledge her, because it wasn't easy for her either. Mm-hmm. But I can speak to my experience because it's my experience. So as men, we get tied up in our identity with work, right? And that's where a lot of the ego comes from. So picture this. You're in a space where you're meeting people for the first time, and the guys kind of congregate over here and the women kind of congregate over here, and you're standing in a circle and you meet someone for the first time and you're like, hey man, what do you do? And they share, and it kind of goes around the circle, and it's coming towards me, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, oh, please, someone just change the topic, because I'm a stay-at-home dad. And sure enough, the question comes to me, Kyle, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a stay-at-home dad. And the first several times I said that, my body posture would kind of hang low, would droop a little bit. I'm like, I felt like it was embarrassing. And then I got to this point where I'm like, wait a minute. I'm looking around and I'm seeing a lot of other men or parents, maybe in general, who do not have a good relationship with their kids. And here I've got this beautiful opportunity to make all this influence and impact on my son and make all these positive deposits into his life. Why is that embarrassing? Why is that bad? And so I just started to reframe that completely, shedding the ego and saying, I'm a stay-at-home dad, right? And the response was one of two things. It was either, cool, how's it going? Tell me more about that. Or the other response is like, this is really awkward. Let's change this up. And so it's amazing how people respond to that. And it's because a lot of times I think in society, we define success professionally. And a lot of times people are sacrificing their personal balance sheet for their professional one. And I stopped that. I said, that's not okay. No amount of success at work is going to cover up for being a failure at home as a husband, as a father. And so I had this beautiful gift of swinging the pendulum all the way to the side and being home with my son for a period of time, which was an amazing gift. Number one, amazing gift to spend time with him. Number two, it gave me this gift of clarity and to say, what do I want to do with my life? I've got a white canvas. We've done the hard work of getting out of all this debt. We are making decisions differently. It's no longer about the dollar. It's about fulfillment. So how do I do that? And so then I just I had this idea. To be honest, I had the idea a long time ago of creating these experiences. And I finally had the chance to do it. And that was a couple of years ago. So now fast forward to today and here we are.
Well, before we get to the experiences, which I promised we will get to, and it's one of the coolest things that you do, just what that story reminded me was that, also this is a cultural problem too, that I'm Indian. In the Southeast Asian community or Asian community in general, men and women generally don't speak to each other about business and finances. And we grew up very much in that culture. And I think it still exists, to be honest with you. I think in the American culture, there's an expectation that you grow up, at 18, you leave the house, you sort of become independent and you have to learn to deal. But, we grow up in very combined cultures, our big, large family culture, right? So there is very much this divide. And what I love about what you said was, money and managing wealth and success, it is a team effort. And the better communication you can have about it, that aligns with your family vision and goals. It's not that the man's responsibility is to go do this or that. It's both of our responsibility to align on a audacious goal and if that happens to be that I'm the primary breadwinner or you're the primary breadwinner, right? And so I think not getting away from taking ownership that designing the life you want is your responsibility as a family. I just thought that was something that needed to be said, because in our culture, that's a really big issue.
Well, and to piggyback on what you just said, which is spot on, it's a great observation. We looked at it as a season. We looked at it as, very few things right now are permanent. This is a temporary thing. And we look back on this, it's just a little blip within the entire scope of our life. I stayed home full time with him, not working for a fraction of our
time.
Life and our relationship. And it's not permanent. And so sometimes from the outside, you're making a move where you're like, it looks like they're taking a step back. But we're taking a step back really to propel ourselves forward. And we knew that was the path. And you have got to operate together under that decision that you do and you make together. And you don't really look to what other people are saying about you, because I'm sure people were wondering, what exactly was going on. But we made the decision together. We had the path written out together, and we knew it was just for a season of time.
Man, ego is a problem. Right? And you're right. It is completely temporary. Who's to say you can't go back? You can't make changes. You can't adjust. Oh, I didn't like it. I'm going to go back. Right?
Yeah.
We get so wrapped up in our identity. And I think that's back to the cultural thing. We grow up that our career is our identity, or our family name is our identity. Yep. We get very caught up with the relationship of our community, our reputation in that community. That's very much how our Asian community is bred. So let's talk about our experiences, because that's the most fun thing to talk about. Reaching beyond experiences. And I'm not even going to try to butcher the concept, because it's a really beautiful thing you did. I'm going to copy it someday. I've told you that, or I've already told you that. But you've created this really beautiful container, safe space for men. And tell us a little bit about it.
Well, and I don't even know if I told you this, but it was an accident. So the first one I meant, and I created a couple years back, the North Shore of Minnesota, with helicopters coming in that took us hovering over waterfalls. I went out to my network, and here's the idea I had. I said, look, I've been to personal growth seminars and conferences, and in corporate America, I got sent to all the leadership things. And it's all the same stuff. You go to a large hotel conference room. There's no windows in that large hotel conference room. And you're sitting next to hundreds, thousands of people, and you get a couple keynote speakers that you could probably YouTube their keynote speech, right? And I'm like, man, this isn't inspiring to me. It's not inspiring. I don't learn this way. Remember, I told you about how I believe we learn. We learn by experiencing, by doing. And so a couple of years back, I was like, I'm just going to flip this whole model on its head. And instead of hundreds of thousands of people, I want 10, 12, 16. Instead of a hotel conference room, I'm using the great outdoors. I'm not really going to stand up on a podium and teach. I'm going to put you in an environment that you are forced to learn, and then we're going to collectively talk about it. And so I had the idea. I put it out to my network. I reserved 10 rooms at this really cool hotel right on the North Shore, and all people that showed up were dudes. And I'm like, wait a minute, I did not market to just dudes.
Really?
No, I did not. And I don't. Maybe it was the beard. Maybe it was the beard that just attracted dudes. I don't know what it was, but what was really obvious to me was that over the course of those 3 days where we were together, is men don't have a container like this to say, like, man, I'm freaking crushing it at work, but I feel like I could do better over here, or I feel like I could do better over here. I don't know how to handle that. Like, how do I do that stuff? And I created this container, and we did waterfall stuff. We did helicopter stuff. We did the sauna into Lake Superior, which is about 50 degrees. I see you do the cold blood stuff. Like, this is a really cold body of water. And we had good food, good champagne, good wine. And I just allowed the guys to be guys and just to do that stuff. And it was amazing. And I was like, you know what? This is clear that I need to do this again. And so I did it again, and I did it again and again and again and again. There's been failures in there as well, which I'm happy to talk about, but that's kind of how it's evolved. And I just said, all right, this needs to be guys only, because it's clear to me that there wasn't a good space for it. So that's kind of how it came to be.
And let me be clear, this is not a bachelor party. This is right, and this is a deep, vulnerable, men talking about their feelings, challenges, issues, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, right? And I think the reason why you're able to keep doing it over and over is because there's a really strong need. And men don't have a space to do that and be with like-minded people, right? That are going through the same things, or don't know where to talk about those topics.
Yeah, and I think it's important that people understand that they're not alone, right? That whatever they're going through, whether it's work, life, whatever, everyone's got something that is not where they want it to be. And it isn't something where we come together on a campfire and we, hold hands and bare chest, sing Kumbaya and stuff. I don't force anyone to do anything that they don't want to do, but what seems to happen, here's what I've noticed. And when you do your own, copy this, and I'm happy to help you design it and come onto yours. But when you give people an opportunity to step into a little bit of fear, a little bit of get outside your comfort zone, what tends to happen is we're more likely to, like, hey man, I just did this hovering over a waterfall on an open door helicopter with you. Do you think I'm going to have this bond with you where I'm more likely to share, like, dude, works great. I got this one thing I'm kind of going through though. What do you think about it? yeah, that happens so much quicker than it would otherwise, where you just get together and talk fantasy football and stuff like that. Like, and that's great too. I don't bash that. I have all that in my life too. But once you experience conversations and high level people talking about realness and rawness and what's going on, you just want more of it. And so at least half of my group is repeat guys. And I think hopefully the fruit to what I've created is shown in some of that work. But yeah, that's kind of the beauty of it.
I love that. I love that message. I mean, I just had a conversation with somebody regarding actually marketing and branding. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about how the consumers are now just looking for realness. They don't want to talk to some corporate brand. They don't want to be talking to corporate salespeople. Everybody is looking now for realness, for authenticity, mm-hmm. for vulnerability. And I think that you've created this space that you can get that instantly, right? Through experience in nature, and so beautiful.
Through getting out of your comfort zone, man. Like, one element is always everyone in the group will be doing one thing that they've never done before. So as men, like, we want to be good. Like, we want to be good at something.
Totally.
It's our competitive nature comes out, ego comes out. These are all highly successful people. But I'm going to humble everyone through one experience where you all get to say, I've never done this before. I probably look like an idiot. I suck at it, but I'm just going to do it anyway. And that's a staple. That's become a pillar to the experience, is one thing in there. One thing I guarantee no one has done before, and that's my job. And then my job is to bring the right people into it who are as interested as in the success of others as they are their own. Like, that's a staple. And it's my job to put the right people into these things. So it's a great challenge. I love it. I love orchestrating all these experiences and then building a tribe of people that are going to support each other. And it's cool, man. We have a lot of fun. We do 2 a year. In 2022, I'm doing 4.
So baby.
It's going to be a great year next year.
Well, I have the honor of doing it with you in October, and I'm super excited.
Yeah.
And I know we're doing a couple of things. And one of them I haven't done in a while. And so I'm practicing so I don't look like a doofus. But the other one I've never done. And I think we're taking expert lessons from a world-renowned water skier. So I think that'll be super amazing. And like you said, everyone starts from zero, right? A lot of people have never done it before. So so cool. What keeps you up at night, Kyle?
Oh, man. Well, I think you get this because you have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so Cal's 4. Well, he'll tell you he's 4.5, but he's not quite 4.5. But I feel just a deep sense of accountability, responsibility for raising a child to be someone who's going to make a difference, someone who's going to stand up for what's right, someone who's going to stand on the side of truth. And it just feels like we live in a world right now where there is an all-out assault on this stuff. And there is just an absolute desire for the hearts, minds, and souls of our kids. And as a parent, that keeps me up, man. I mean, I have 22, 23 nieces and nephews on my wife's side. And we're making this move. We're building a house in Grand Forks, North Dakota. It's 2 hours away from our lake place. So we're going to keep this as our retreat. But I want to be an active role in their lives as an uncle, because again, as a parent, like, it takes a lot to raise a kid, and there's so much, there's a, Dr. Meg Meeker, I forget her title, child psychologist or something like that, where she's got a book out, and there's some studies done that you need 3 to 4 to 5 positive influences in a child's life outside of mom and dad. And so I take it very seriously. Like, I got to play a role, not just in my son, but in my nieces and my nephews and in the community, because if I don't do it, who's going to do it? Like, we can't just leave that up to someone else and hope they have their best interests in mind. So, man, that's what's keeping me up. It's a deep topic, man. And it's something I'm really passionate about. because the experiences we create, we donate money from that group to building orphanage homes and things like that. So it's that's a deep responsibility that I have, and I feel because I think there's basically a war out there for the hearts, souls, and minds of kids, and I've got one of those kids, and so that's really important to me.
That's so good. I don't even know if I can match that. You said you wanted him to, have a really strong presence in the world and show up and stand up for what's so good. I'm starting at, let's just be kind. And I think we say that all day. And, as kids, especially as toddlers, like no is the first word that comes out of their mouth, and they're learning that how to test boundaries, and their personalities are so strong. I have two rambunctious little girls, and they are just full of energy, balls of energy. But we just really want to raise kind people. And I think for me, I've gone through my seasons of like being an entrepreneur, being way too tough on people, not having compassion. I'm not very opinionated about politics and things like that, but like generally speaking, you get into your own head and you get into your own rhythms and not care about what's going on and giving people grace and understanding and compassion. And after you have kids, that hits you really hard. I think for me, at least it did. And that level of responsibility between kids and teams and employees and your customers and all of that, and just like starting with being kind and giving people grace. The world needs a little bit more of that. What is one piece of advice you find yourself giving the most?
Oh man. That's so good. And I'm going to repeat, this is not my quote, but I can't tell you whose quote this is. So I apologize for that, but it's, be where your feet are. And it basically just is a call to be present in the moment. And we've done that through our experiences. There's few things I've experienced in life where I'm like, nothing else matters right now. And one of those things was fly fishing. I don't know if you've ever been, I'm not a fisherman at all, but we went fly fishing on our last one, and you have to focus on just what's right in front of you. And if you don't, you miss it. You will miss it. You will miss a fish. And so I crave those times in life where I can put aside distractions. I can put aside all the stress. I can put aside all the noise that goes on in my head. And I can just say, I just want to be present in this moment. And I just want to be here. So I have a lot of, time in terms of quantity with my son, but is it quality? Am I present with him? Is my phone going off with notifications? Am I looking at those notifications? And it's something that I work on a lot. And so I just like to share what I go through real time with people. And that's just be where your feet are and be present, be in the moment.
So good. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we can exchange a riff or whatever we want at the end. But what does real richness mean to you?
Man, that's a good question. I'll tell you the first thing that pops into my head. The Italians have La Dolce Vita, right? The sweet life. Costa Ricans have Pura Vida, right? Pure life, simple life. And I just got thinking about that, and I'm like, what do we have? What do I have? What does that mean to me? And I think it's enjoying the fullness of life and experiencing life to the fullest. And I've tried to, as I've gotten a little bit, not to say that I'm old, but as I've gotten into my late 30s and now early 40s, and I've got a little one running around, I've detached, richness and success. I've detached that meaning from money. Money is a part of it, but it is not all of it. And it used to be all of it. And some of the sweetest moments I've had, especially when we moved up here to the lake, is just sitting by the water and looking out on the water with my son. Doesn't involve anything but just being in the moment and sitting with him and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. So if I had to answer that question, what is richness? I go to fullness, and I think of how am I and how can I experience the fullness of life?
So good. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, it's fun, man. I enjoy I enjoy it. Good questions coming through. I told you I'm sweating a little bit.
I know, because I will tell the audience, I did not prepare him, and I gave him a handful of questions, but I asked you a lot of things I didn't tell you in advance. So you did great, man.
But I tell you, that's how
I wanted it to be authentic, and I wanted you to just tell, and you did a great job.
I podcast too, and I sometimes I write down questions because I think I want to ask this question. But the question that I always want to ask is whatever is right in front of me. And it's wherever the conversation goes. And that's the best conversation. I've listened to some like big name people that go on podcast. They tell the same freaking things over and over again. And they always pull it back. And I'm like, how do we just get people off track and be authentic? And that right there, when you say that, like get off track to be authentic, that's not good, because you should just be like, your track should be authentic. And it's what you're dealing with and what you're experiencing and processing real time. That's authentic. And so I appreciate you asking the questions you did, because I think that was right on. Well,
look, brother, thank you so much for doing this. I think I'd love to do this again with you sometime, maybe after the retreat. And you're just such a blessed guy, and super cool to have met you and be in your circle. So
thanks, man. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the wake surfing. And you need to know, and your audience needs to know, that we always put together a bloopers reel. So just be careful. I'll make sure that the drone and the video is constantly on you when you're wake surfing. I'm kidding. We won't do that. We will do a bloopers reel, but I'll give you a little bit of a break.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, man.